Hello and welcome to season 6 of The Pledge. It's nice to see my fellow panellists have been keeping busy while we've been off your screens. Afwa's book is being published, Nick has been keeping us all entertained on the radio, Rachel Johnson, meanwhile, has been completely detached from reality, winding up everyone around her and talking a load of nonsense. Oh, and she went on Celebrity Big Brother too. Coming up in the next hour, Greg thinks it's time to admit the special relationship isn't so special. Carol argues the gender pay gap at the BBC isn't the problem. Afwa explains why she's glad racist comments by Joe Marnie have come out. And Nick has had enough of the Army's new recruitment video. But first, it's me. And I am sad and concerned this week for the 20,000 people employed in the UK by Carillion and all of those in the supply chain. Their future is now uncertain after the company went bust. But it took minutes for the situation to be hijacked for political gain. Critics reacted with fury at the government, as though somehow this is all their fault. Jeremy Corbyn has demanded an entire overhaul of the full system and for public sector work to stop being outsourced. I disagree with all of the above. Nationalisation is not the answer to this problem. Yes, of course, the government has made mistakes with contract management. But Carillion was a private company whose board of directors are squarely responsible for the mess that we now find ourselves in. It is time to stop all of this political squabbling and instead focus on minimising the damaging consequences.
Well, for new viewers starting here with Carillion, in a sentence or two, it provides everything from school meals to guarding our jails to running our operating theatres, and it grew out of the old Tarmac Group, and as you rightly say, it's an outsourcing company, 20,000 roughly people here, 40,000 plus around the world. But the problem, and this is why I half agree with you, is this. Profit warnings started for this company in, I think it was July of last year. Yep. Within 7 or 8 days after those profit warnings, the government was still handing lucrative contracts to the tune of about £1.5 billion. Then further profit warnings. In September, more money was made available, and then further profit warnings. By the end of the year, around £2 billion worth of orders had been placed with Carillion in a company that had a series of profit warnings, the chief executive had quit, and the share price was in free fall, and the city was betting against it. I think you're right in much of what you say, but that was criminal irresponsibility to keep giving money in that way.
Well, I'll respond and then I'll bring Greg in. So, criminal responsibility, did you say, in terms of irresponsibility?
Yeah.
So, of course...
You're funding failure is what I say, Michelle. You're funding failure. Failing company. Go find someone else.
I would absolutely agree that it looks strange when we have a company that has profit warning, and you're still contracting with them. But to give this some context, Carillion has hundreds and hundreds of contracts with the government, spanning all manner of places. So the first contract that you describe after July, you're absolutely right, it came after the first profit warning. And what then happened is that contingency was put in place. So to get a contract, so that contract was awarded, I think, 5 working days after that first profit warning. Now, to win that contract in the first place would have taken months of work for the bidders to have gotten to that point to be awarded that contract. Then contingency measures was put in place. So that award was done as a joint venture, a partnership. So it wasn't just Carillion that was responsible. And there was measures put in place that actually, if anything happened to Carillion, the slack, so to call it, that would be picked up by the other partners. The CEO had resigned. They came back with plans to reassure the government. So what I'm saying is, if the government didn't invest those contracts with Carillion, what would have happened to Carillion? So you've got a government that's already in bed, for want of a better phrase, with Carillion, to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of contracts. They're warning about profits.
Reality had to be faced at some point, and that's what... Surely, if you'd gone back then, there might have been a way to save some of those jobs which are now on the line as a result of the company going to the wall. And I realise it would have been a massive vote of no confidence in the Carillion. I understand that, and that you would have wiped the company out. But at least then you'd have had 8 months of where we find ourselves now.
I'm interested in Greg, because you always tell us every week you're a businessman, Greg.
I agree with you to some extent. I think it's pretty easy journalism to turn it and blame it on the politicians, which is what I think, by and large, journalists did. Largely because I don't think anyone understood Carillion. I think it's an incredibly complex company. I mean, it's different things, isn't it? It's a building organisation. It's building hospitals and the rest of it. That's not the same as running delivery contracts, which is what it does in a lot of places.
But you wouldn't carry on giving money to a company that's going to the wall, Greg.
You know,
Well, hang on. The moment you don't give it because you think they're going to the wall, you sent them to the wall.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
You,
You've
okay,
sent them to the wall.
you guys are all blaming politicians. Let's hear from one of them.
I'm not blaming a politician. Yeah, he is.
He is. And you did, Michelle. You said that it's been co-opted and people playing political football with it. Let's hear what Jeremy Corbyn had to say
You didn't listen
about
to my
it.
intro, young lady. I said completely the opposite, but let's listen to Corbyn.
We need our public services provided by public employees with a public service ethos and a strong public oversight. As the ruins of Carillion lie around her, will the Prime Minister act to end this costly racket of the relationship between government and some of these companies?
And what I think Jeremy Corbyn's getting at, which is where I agree with him, and I don't agree with you, Michelle, although I agree with some of what you said, is that I think, you said, Carillion is a private company, right? It is a private company, but that's not really the structural reality we're facing. It's functioning like a parastatal company. It's completely dependent on government business. The government is completely dependent on it. Now, Nick outlined the kind of catalogue of things that happened
I wouldn't say it's completely dependent on government.
Well, it's largely, it's clearly not a viable business on its own. And what I think we have is the kind of worst of all worlds, because we've got a company that has almost the inefficiency of someone not operating according to market forces, but we also have these executives getting paid huge amounts as if they are a functioning, viable private sector company. So the taxpayer at the end loses out. If you listen to what local authorities have been saying, away from the city and people shorting Carillion, local authorities are now coming out and saying about the quality of service they've been getting from Carillion for a long time. Contracts not delivered on properly, very poor customer service, complete disinterest in the experience of the projects they're delivering, missing deadlines repeatedly.
This is not contract management.
This is not a company that is a good example of the private sector, and it seems that yet again now it's the public sector that's going to have to pick up the pieces, and I think that is the structural issue that Jeremy Corbyn is getting at, and we should all think about this, because while I'm not saying nationalise everything, it's clear that these private finance initiatives do not always work out, and we need to ask questions about it.
When you have a third of government spending going to external suppliers, 250 billion quid goes to outside suppliers. The government should have kept a close eye on this, and what it seems to me is that they offloaded responsibility so that if it all went wrong, they could blame somebody else. And, of course, it did go wrong. And I think what's really bad about this is that there's no transparency, no accountability, no actual good accounting that would have seen this coming and that could have actually stopped it. When you've got tens of thousands of jobs dependent on tens of thousands of vital services and jobs dependent on a company this big, you should have had a closer eye on it. And you can't ignore the warnings that were given beforehand. And what I don't understand about private companies, if it's uneconomical to run care homes or hospitals or schools, how would we expect a private company to wave a magic wand and make it work?
So who does it? Who does run the care homes then? Who does?
Well, the care homes are run by Carillion, but they haven't made them work.
So who does them?
Well, the thing is,
if we take Afwa's point from
Corbyn wants renationalisation. I wonder how people would feel if renationalisation, they knew it was going to be higher taxes, higher prices, more red tape, because that's what nationalisation would mean.
No, but you've got it right, I think, there, that what's happened, I suspect, with these is you talk to people who are involved in similar businesses, the profits are actually quite low.
On the construction side.
On the construction side are ridiculously low.
Service,
you've only got to get it wrong by 2 or 3% and you're in trouble. I think a lot of is that they've squeezed down the prices, which I think ends up with what Afwa describes. That the service being given isn't very good. They're not making any money out of it, so and that's what's happened here, I think, in lots of these. But there's lots of different businesses involved here. I think really, if you're a small contractor who works for Carillion, you're getting paid probably 3 to 4 months after you were due to be paid. So you've just been working for 4 months. You've been paying your people for 4 months.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And you're just not going to get paid. And a lot of small businesses are going to go bust because their cash flow disappears and their bank. I mean, I see all the banks have said, no, we'll be very helpful. Come on.
And taxpayers, I just read a thing that taxpayers are going to be on the hook for 199 billion quid's worth of stuff until the 2040s. I mean, that's actually going to hit everybody.
We all talk about nationalisation as if it is such an efficient way of running things. This is not an efficient model. You know, you have these huge companies soaking up all of this money. Contractors aren't actually getting paid that much or on time.
But neither is nationalisation, Afua. I'm old enough to remember how things were nationalised.
Also don't think, by the way, Labour is just saying nationalise everything. But I do think we need to look at.
He did say that.
It's becoming a knee-jerk reaction that that private sector good, public sector bad, and it's not working. There are things like care homes which are not profitable.
What would you do then? Because you don't want nationalisation, you don't want the Carillions of this world. So what are we going to do?
Well, it's clear that we are going to have to spend public money on these services now anyway, right? Right?
Yeah.
We don't have a choice. If there is an amount of public money being spent on things, we need to work out the most cost-effective way of allocating that public money to these services. And by huge private companies like Carillion is not the answer.
There's been no accountability here.
It's time to move on. I think Carillion might come back a few times.
Right.
Has the so-called special relationship between Britain and the US been permanently damaged by our politicians slagging off President Trump? And if it has, does it matter? I think the answer to both has to be no. So what if he didn't come to open the new US embassy in London this week? The whole US diplomatic service is working around Trump, not for him. They know they're dealing with a child, not a stable genius. And they know his time as president is inevitably limited. Over the years, British politicians sucking up to American presidents has been pretty disastrous for us. Just remember Tony Blair in Iraq. Some 80 years ago, the American writer H.L. Mencken wrote, "On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of America will reach their heart's desire and the White House will be adorned by a moron." Well, the moron is with us, and we might as well say so and thank the Lord that he cancelled his trip to Britain.
See, I don't necessarily agree with what's going on about this, So Donald Trump, whether you like him or dislike him, and quite frankly, I'd be surprised if he really cares what we think of him either way, but whether you like him or dislike him, you should still respect the position that he holds, the office that he represents. He is somebody that has a very powerful position, very senior position, and it's an office that we should be working closely with. It's a country that we should do our best to have a good relationship with. And for me, where I struggle with all of this is, by the way, I think that Trump just comes across as an absolute idiot at various different places. Some of the things that he says are absolutely cringeworthy and embarrassing. So I'm not stood here saying that, I want to get an I Love Donald Trump T-shirt or anything like that. But just because I don't agree with what he does and the way that he does a lot of things doesn't mean that actually I should be battening down the hatches, pushing him away and saying you're not welcome in this country on a state visit or otherwise. And I think by doing that, we're just going to be causing ourselves problems in the long run.
I think actually if he'd come, the protest would be such that I think you'd do a lot more damage than good in terms of your relationship with Trump. But what I'm saying is, look, everybody knows what Trump is. I mean, if you read, I've been reading Michael Wolff's book, and if it's true, I mean, it is almost funny. I mean, it's not.
Can I just bring in what Theresa May said about this special relationship?
The relationship that the UK has with the United States is about something much bigger than just the relationship between the two individuals as President and Prime Minister. That's important. But actually, we have a long-standing special relationship with the United States. It's based on shared values.
You see, this is my problem now, because on a normal day I would have disagreed with you and said we had to have a special relationship. I actually think that we don't, the shared values we might have once had with America, we don't now have. And I think we have to be brave enough as a country when we don't agree with what a leader says about something. We have to be brave enough to stand up and say so. But it's interesting, this special relationship, you will know this better than me, that in America, they don't talk about a special relationship with Britain. They think it's a bit of a joke, and they only talk about it when there are Brits in town, because they think we're needy and we want to hear it. But also, there was a survey, and it was 2009, that said 14 out of 25 EU countries countries thought they had a very special relationship too with America. But the bottom line is, I don't want to call him a moron because, and it's interesting that the doctor today came out and said that he scored 30 out of 30 in a cognitive test, so he's not nuts. I mean, that's now officially he's not nuts.
Well, but I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm glad you mentioned Donald Trump, because I spent my Christmas redoing the Trump card, making it absolutely the pledge Trump card.
Yes.
But, Greg, it's a Trump card with a difference.
Oh.
Because, as Carol mentioned the cognitive test, and as you are closest in age to Donald Trump, and we want to check your capabilities, I wonder if you'd like to take this test. Now, you can see we go. I've got the pen, so we're good to go. So you go from 1 to A to 2. Where do you want to go next in the cognitive test? And I'll tell you that Donald Trump passed this.
Well,
so...
you pretty easily go to B, I think.
OK, I go to B. And where do I go
well,
after
then
B?
you go 3 and C and 4 and D.
So I go B. Where do I go from 3?
You go to C.
I go to C.
If it's logical.
Yes, and
then
then
you
I
go
go
to 4.
Yes.
Then you go to D.
Yes.
Then you go to 5, and then you go to E.
I think he's got that right, hasn't he?
Is this, sorry,
Unfortunately,
is this
so much for the Trump card, then.
If that's what you have to do to prove that you've got it all there, then I think it's a bit thin.
I wonder if in the United States they would say he's a moron. Stock market up 27% since Trump was sworn in. Sweeping tax cuts, 1.5 trillion tax cut over 10 years. Corporation tax, if you were running your businesses over there, will get down to 21%. One more to come to you. 2 million jobs created last year, 1.84 million of which were created by President Trump in 11 months. That was considerably better than some previous presidents have done. I wonder if in America, Greg Dyke, they'd call him a moron if you just got your job back.
Look, first of all, the idea that you create jobs you get into the White House and suddenly you're creating jobs, these are all planned. That all comes as a result of what's been happening over the years. I mean, the recession ended.
Stock market up.
The stock market
taxes
up.
down.
Yeah, well, that's why they went up, because the taxes are coming down.
Well,
surpassed 17 of his predecessors in terms of growth.
Sure, but then you look at some of the things he says and does, and he's a clown. Well, have you read the book?
I haven't, no, because I don't know how authentic it will be.
Well,
I think there's quite a bit of tittle-tattle.
Yes, that's what I said earlier. If the book is true, it's scary, because he doesn't read anything, he doesn't listen to anybody.
That's what he said about you at the BBC.
He goes to bed at 7 o'clock every night and watches 3 different
Cameron
televisions.
said the same of Obama. He said he was the most self-obsessed man that he'd ever met, and also that he thought he knew better than anyone in the room. That goes with the job of president.
Well, I'm glad to hear that President Trump has got some defenders. It surprises me, because actually what I've found in this country is that the only thing I've known that's united the right and the left is they all think he's a clown.
But isn't it funny, in France, they've always been more detached about this special relationship, haven't they? And here Trump has already been to Paris. Macron has hosted a successful visit. Macron even called him out on climate change, and yet they're still buddies. It worked there. So we don't have to be as close, I don't think, as we think.
Well, we've set ourselves up in this respect. You know, I mean, I don't know what's happened to you over Christmas, Carol. Actually, I'm agreeing with you so much today.
Oh,
it's a little bit disarming.
Won't last after. Your debate's coming. It won't last.
I have to go after Michelle instead. Michelle, you know, you said we should respect the office. He doesn't respect the office. No. This is the thing about Trump. I mean, look at these fake news awards. To have the leader of supposedly the free world talking about the enemies of the people when he's talking about the free press, that's the kind of thing I would expect, Nick, you know, for you to be throwing around North Korea and your boiler suit analogies that you love so much. This, you know, this is not a man who respects the democracy that he leads. So
but if he works for
how are the rest of us supposed to take him seriously?
What a way to say. If he
you know what, fine. And you know what? It's
back.
true he's created jobs, although fewer than Obama in his last year. It's true that he's cut taxes, especially for the richest in society, which, you know...
No, they're for the job. We just need to get
feeds into his narrative.
No, one second. It wasn't Mr. Cameron who talked about Obama being self-obsessed. It was Steve Hilton. So
he said Cameron had told him that.
But then that goes to the interesting question of, you know, the personality versus the policies of these leaders. Now, I don't care about whether he's a nice person. I'm confident that he's not. And, you know, I'm reading Fire and Fury as well, but I didn't need to read it to know that I don't like him. And also, I think it's probably unhelpful for those of us who are fundamentally offended by someone like Trump just finding more and more things that make us dislike him. You know, we already know that we don't like him. I know. I'm not his fan base, and I was never meant to be. That's not what this is about. This is about, like Carol said, our values.
That he wants to be liked. He does want to be liked. If Wolf's right, he does want to be liked.
Needs to get off Twitter, then.
And you know, when he goes to China, you know, he says things that he didn't say about China when he was running. Why? Because he got applauded in life.
Can I just point something out that I think everyone seems to miss? So it's all well and good sitting around this table saying, oh, is this, is that, we don't like him and we're fundamentally outraged. a lot of people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, they did.
And what I would say
More
is...
voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't say that. I said a lot of people voted for him. And not only did they vote for him, they voted for him on the things that he was saying. And a lot of the things that he was saying, he's kept those promises. So for the first time in a lot of people's memorable history, they actually feel that, you know what, we voted for this person, we liked what he said, and actually he's starting to deliver on what he said. He's keeping his promises, and they respect that. Now, I don't understand why people don't seem to get that. Why has everyone got such a problem?
No, but just finishing the point I was trying to make in terms of our special relationship. If America as a nation is heading down a path, and because maybe even if the majority of its electorate want things that are fundamentally opposed to our values, then I think we should reappraise the special relationship, especially since it mainly seems to exist in our imaginations. And that's why we, unlike Macron, can't host him, because it makes us look even more unedifyingly
Let's stop where I agree with you. It's
already.
a good place to stop.
And you're a lawyer, you've just written a book. Sucky bloody happy. What does that mean?
I think you shouldn't have interrupted the first time. Sucky happy is
OK, now, be honest. How many of you had ever heard of Carrie Gracie before the latest BBC pay gender row? And how many of you have even a jot of sympathy for a woman who says a salary of £180,000 just isn't enough? Miss Gracie, a respected Mandarin-speaking journalist, was upset the BBC's US and Middle East male foreign correspondents are earning more than her. But John Sopel and Jeremy Bowen are on TV every night, often in dangerous situations. The China correspondent, not so much. Not everyone with the same job title should earn the same money. Pay for correspondence shouldn't be about gender, but talent, experience, star quality, amount of airtime and danger money. I'm sorry if you think this is a betrayal of the sisterhood, Afua. I think it's a betrayal of licensed payers' money. The crux of this argument is the BBC is throwing money at six-figure salaries in the first place, which is why this pay row shouldn't be about levelling up women's pay. It should be about taking down all pay to fair, equal and reasonable levels. Culture Secretary Matt Hancock reckons no one at the BBC should earn more than the PM. I think he's right.
Carol, listening to that was an emotional roller coaster.
OK.
Because the point you ended up at, I think, is exactly what... But the point you ended up at is exactly what Carrie Gracie is saying. Actually, I'm just going to show you what she says. She says, I am not asking for more money.
But she was.
I believe I am very well paid already, especially as someone working for a publicly funded organisation. I simply want the BBC to abide by the law and value men and women equally. So she's not asking for more money, Carol. She's saying what you're saying, which is that why are their salaries that high at a publicly funded organisation? And secondly, Carol, what you were saying, it does make me sad, because I feel like you've internalised the misogyny that we are constantly being told. You have convinced yourself that she is worth less because you talked about airtime, star quality.
Yeah.
I knew who Carrie Gracie was.
I'm sure
Carrie
you did,
Gracie delivers considered incredibly difficult reports.
Not very often, though.
Because how often do we show stuff on China? And when we do, it is lengthy, it is detailed. It's delivered. She speaks two languages. She has also faced personal and security threats doing her reporting. I think the reason that people like you, Carol, think she is worth less is because you have bought into the narrative.
When did I ever say she was worthless? I never said she was worthless. What I said
didn't say worthless. I said worthless.
Oh, I said worthless. OK, listen. We have got an elite class of presenters here, the lowest paid of which, the ones who are on 100 grand, who were saying that it wasn't enough money, it wasn't parity with the guys. That's 5 times the average salary in this country, which is 27.5 grand. You know, we've got gross income inequality in this country is the norm, and I'm much more bothered about the people at the bottom end of the scale than I am about presenters at the top who are, let's face it, are unfortunate. This row should never have been about... No, listen, let me finish. This row should never have been about gender. It should have been about licence payers' money being used to pay these gross inflated salaries, like the one they're used to pay Greg Dyke.
Let's defer to him, because no one's been closer to it. To remind the listeners who ran the View.
I've got the official BBC position, which is my job to read out, which seems a bit unfair, but never mind. We've reduced the amount we pay talent by a quarter over the past 5 years. However, we're not competing in the same market as politicians and other public sector jobs. A number of presenters have left the BBC for considerably more money. We always look to negotiate deals at discount against the market. Right. The question, I agree partly with you in terms of because someone is called an editor doesn't mean they have to earn the same as every other editor. I mean, you've got to look at the job and say what it is. And there is no doubt that the premier job in the BBC is New York, is Washington.
And the Middle East.
What I would like to know is what her predecessor was earning, which they've never come out, because her predecessor was a male. So, if her predecessor was earning more than she's getting, then I think you have a very valid
she was
point.
only in China. She was only in China for 6 months a year. She was only there. Sopel had to move to Washington. He lives there. His family's there. Carrie Gracie's there for 6 months a year. Can I just bring us up? This is a matter for public record. This is not about embarrassing you. But when you were DG, your salary was 375 grand, and you got a 456 grand payoff. Now that's.
I gave my payoff away.
Okay, but I'm saying this as a matter of record.
I gave it to the University of York. Actually.
The guy who followed you, Mark Thompson, he immediately went to 800 grand. Now, why? Why is the job you did suddenly worth half as much again?
Because that's
is licensed
I can tell you the answer. I happen to agree with you. I don't think they should have done it. No. But that's what he was earning at Channel 4. And they paid that to get Michael Grade, who was then chairman, paid that to get him. I went to the BBC at a third of what I'd earned the year before because it was a good job. I fancied it. I wanted to do it, but I'd made quite a lot of money anyway. So,
but this is taxpayers' money, and they can't just use it like
I think you're confusing two arguments. One is the argument about I think the BBC has got to take seriously equal pay, and I think they've promised they will. They're going to do an analysis, and I suspect they were quite surprised to find out they weren't an equal pay company. Actually,
really?
Yes. I don't think there would have been a structure and they said what are women earning? I don't think
they would have known that the top 10. There were hardly any women in the top 10.
How many women came to you asking for pay rises when you were DG? How many women compared to men?
Not many people came to me and asked for pay rises. Yeah, I can think of... No, there were as many women. But then I had a lot of women at senior positions. So that, we had control of BBC One, control of BBC Two, head of Radio 4, head of radio, head of television. They were all women. Yeah. So the people I dealt with and negotiated with were disproportionately women.
But then, I think that there's two separate arguments here about one is whether or not we're paying too high a salary in the first place. And my response to that would be... ultimately, it's market. It's the market.
It's not market. It's a public service broadcasting machine.
Yeah, but at the same time, I know the BBC is public service. But if you want the best journalists, and you want, and journalist A can work for the BBC for 50 quid, or he can be over here on a commercial broadcaster for 1,000 quid. He or she is going to choose £1,000, possibly. So anyway, to me, I think that it's market forces which determines that, and also how good somebody's agent is, which determines how well they're getting paid. That's my first point. My second point on equality in pay, you'll know the answer to this. When an organisation is so vast and so broad with so many people, one of the challenges it has is actually taking the time and having the data to actually be benchmarking all of that data. And what goes on in a lot of organisations is sometimes, and I'm not arguing this on behalf of organisations, because some organisations are poor in what they're paying and all the rest of it, but often in a big organisation, that data set to simply sit down and look at two people at similar levels doing similar roles, having that data to hand to compare isn't always easy and available. Is that fair or not? So would you...
Well, I mean, what we're talking about in this is BBC News, where they are all, by and large, employees of the BBC. As I say, I doubt whether, until recent years, anybody had done that analysis across the BBC. They're doing it now, and that's why they say by 220...
Let me just come in, because you had the official BBC comment. I wonder if we can see some unofficial BBC comment. John Humphreys proving, of course, the old adage, you're never alone with a microphone.
First question will be how much of your salary you are prepared to hand over to Carrie Gracie to keep her. And then a few comments about your other colleagues, like our Middle East editor and the other men who are earning too much. She's actually suggested that you should lose money. You know that, don't you? You've read the thing properly, have you?
It actually gets worse, so we'll probably draw a veil over it there. Just briefly, Afua, just to respond...
Can you see the smoke coming out of my nostrils right now?
But John Humphreys is a bit of an old dinosaur, isn't he?
A £600,000 a year dinosaur.
It's banter in a new...
it's the £600,000 a year, not the banter that is making me annoyed.
The media, it's impossible to have parity in the media, because it's not like we're... And I'm saying nothing, I'm not derogatory, but we're not packing biscuits or we're not stacking shelves. Someone brings a different wealth of experience, someone brings that. So the idea you can all get paid the same in this game is never going to happen.
I've got a real quick question. question. You've just said it was the 600,000 that was making you angry, not his comments. If someone said to you, I'll pay £600,000 to host radio shows or TV shows or whatever, would you say, no, thank you, it's too much money?
I honestly think it is not acceptable for a public service broadcaster.
Would you turn that package down?
I would, if it was for a public service broadcast. But I would like to frame all this by saying I'm not sitting here arguing that that BBC journalists shouldn't be paid market value, but there are grossly inflated salaries.
But it's also fallacy to think that the BBC gets paid less. Robert Peston is on 300 odd grand at ITV. His Oppo on the other saying Andrew Marr, he's on 446,000. So it's not true.
And I look forward to the day, Michelle, where you can hold me up on that because I'm earning so much that I have to answer questions. It's me up next, and find out why I am relieved of the comments by former UKIP First Lady Jo Marnie hit the headlines. This week, public remarks by people involved in political leadership got a lot of us very upset. The charming Jo Marnie, ex-girlfriend of the UKIP party leader, revealed, not for the first time, that there are people in this country who see black people as ugly and the forthcoming royal wedding as a process of tainting royal blood. Donald Trump managed to simultaneously offend anyone with small children who now ask what a certain word beginning with S and ending in hole means, people from African nations, a mere 15% of the entire world's population, and people with immigrant backgrounds, which is basically all Americans. Why are we all so surprised at these remarks? I wasn't. In fact, I was relieved. Both Trump and Marnie were just declaring loudly the ignorance so many people, including politicians, celebrities and the media, have thought quietly. Now that their comments are out there, it's so much harder for anyone to be in denial about the existence of these views and their influence. And perversely, that may in fact be a good thing.
I mean, I take huge issue with what you just said there. It's declaring loudly the ignorance of many, many people. I mean, you're basically saying there that there are whole swathes of this country who are racist, which is absolutely not true. And you know, the insinuation that people have treated Meghan Markle in any other way that's positive. The media, for instance, the insinuation is that the media have treated her badly. And you're saying that the media have echoed what she called Jo Marnie has said. What she said was Meghan Markle is ugly, that her seed will taint the royal family, that we don't want other races and cultures to invade ours, that she's a gender equality, something beginning with T, and that she's a dumb little actress no one's ever heard of. I have heard no one in this country, in the media or anyone else, come close to saying or thinking those vile comments. In fact, I will talk about the media in the sense that I think they have everything that they have welcomed her. They've been positive. Everything she has talked about her race more than anyone else, and the media have reported that faithfully in the most empowering way, I think. And I think if anyone in this country thinks about Meghan Markle, they think about the fact that they think about her ethnicity in a very, very positive way. You said something that you said recently. You said, after this engagement, now it will not be possible to argue that being black is incompatible with being British. And that's the reaction I see from almost everyone in this country. The fact that someone from an ethnic background is in the royal family. You also said in another piece, I've been reading up about it this week.
Thrilled.
You said, same piece actually, you said that you grew up feeling that the monarchy was fundamental to Britishness, but the Britishness they represented excluded you. Now it doesn't exclude you, and it's fantastic. And to actually say that this is the ignorance of lots of the views, these views represent the views of lots of people in this country, I think it's really insulting to the people of this country who have done nothing but adore Meghan Markle.
Well, first of all, thank you for reading and citing so many of my articles.
Well, it took a lot to get through it all, but I did.
The article includes the phrase "sucky up" to the royal family.
I'm so pleased that I've coined a new word today. So, having read my articles, Carol, you'll know that I massively welcome the coming royal wedding and the fact that
you do, but you're saying everyone else in this country
not
doesn't.
Everyone else. But Carol, when
huge swathes.
First of all, let me ask you a question.
Right.
Where do you think Jo Marnie's views come from? Do you think they come out of nowhere, out of thin air?
No, I think what she said was vile.
But where do you think she got those ideas?
What do you mean, where do I think they came? They came from her head. They came from what she believes in, what she thinks. But you can't say that
where
what
do you think she
thinks...
gets those
Oh, you think that
and
everyone
beliefs?
else in this country has...
No,
kind of...
and I didn't say everyone anything, Carol.
You said,
and I didn't say everyone is racist either. You put those words into my mouth.
You said loudly the ignorance by so many people, you said. So many people.
I said ignorance, first
You said
of all.
ignorance by so many people.
Surely
But you haven't answered my question, by the way.
Well, I don't know where it comes from. How do I know where her views come from?
It didn't take... Did it take what President Trump said and what Joe Marnie said for you to realise that? Unfortunately, there is, and I kind of find for Carol a little bit here, please God, it's a decreasing number, but there is always going to be a bunch of people in this country. You sure didn't need to hear those remarks for the light to go on over that, did you?
Well, you say that, Nick, but so I'll answer what both of you are saying. I think we often congratulate ourselves in this country for being tolerant, a word which I have an issue with, by the way, because if you think about tolerance, what it actually means is that you look a bit brown and you eat different food, but I'm going to put up with you being in my environment. Think about what tolerance means. It's almost like I'll do you a favour by accepting you. Why do you need to be tolerant to accept that there are people around you?
Because there was a time when people weren't tolerant, and the reason that yes, but that's
what
now,
I'm getting at.
That's not now.
All right, Carol.
And you don't give us credit. You know, another thing you said about you know, in that same piece, you said that the royal family was the antithesis of diversity. It isn't now. Time has moved on.
Yes.
People's views have changed. That's a fantastic.
I mean, you're
thing.
citing what I've said, so I agree.
But it's a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic thing. But you seem to still be sniffing since there's a huge swathes of this country.
I'll bring everyone else in,
but
just to finish responding to you, I think what you're saying about the media welcoming Meghan Markle and the royal wedding, I think now it's more or less true, which is wonderful, and that's why
that's not true.
That is not true. Carol, Prince Harry.
Yeah.
Issued a statement, an unprecedented statement for royal, himself pointing to the racism in the media coverage when his relationship with Meghan Markle was first announced. So if you think I'm a fantasist, then you have to say that Harry's a fantasist as well, because he called out the racism that had been, and it was not a couple of remarks. I'm not. It was a litany of media coverage that had
involved with this.
incredibly. Come on. So anyway, Michelle.
Oh, God, no, we was getting into it there. We was enjoying ourselves.
Carol hasn't been reading the same newspapers as me, like the Daily Mail.
But your question is a valid question, where did that come from? And therefore, it's not only her, there are others. But I think all you can do is say, over a period of time, is it changing? And in my lifetime, and certainly over the last 40 years, I mean, if you go to football matches, by and large, there are not racist chants any longer. There are not racist. If you went 30 years ago, I mean, it was really unpleasant. People threw bananas. That's the change. Now, some of those people who now no longer throw bananas still racist? Yeah. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, Nick's point is right. There are still going to be racist people, but it's changing with generations.
Has evolved.
Which is great.
Which is great.
But also, the point that I'm making here is that. And I, of course, unequivocally welcome the change. And my life experience is completely different to the experience of people 30 years older than me who got chased down the street by people with bats trying to hospitalise them because they were black. I've never experienced that, and thank God. Meghan Markle is another, in my view, hugely symbolic step towards progress in our society. But the point that I'm making, Carol, is
reflected in the media.
Joe Marnie is not the only person who thinks this, and furthermore, it doesn't come from a vacuum. It comes from a long history where overt racism turned into coded racism, and that is evident in the initial press reports, not just 1 year ago.
You've seen racism everywhere.
Thank you. That's my point.
But I'm telling you, I don't see colour in people. I don't regard someone as being different if their skin tone is one and another. To me, just people are people. And where I struggle a little bit is I feel like I'm constantly having stuff pushed onto me that makes me consider racism in places that I never even saw it. So, for example, one of the most recent things is that H&M sweatshirt. I saw this little kid in a sweatshirt, cute little sweatshirt, forget about it, moved on.
This is the black lad modelling a T-shirt with the expression "cheeky little monkey."
Yeah, it caused
clever little monkey.
I know what you're saying is well-meaning, so that's fine. Because do you think, as a white person in a society where the majority of people are white, you have a good understanding of the ways in which race affects people psychologically. Because when you say you don't see racism, Michelle, I wouldn't expect you to see it, if I'm quite honest with you, because it's not your experience. I wouldn't imagine you get othered regularly. I wouldn't imagine that you carry and experience the baggage of being in a country that colonised on a white supremacist ideology other countries for 400 years. You know, and it's very easy to say that if you don't experience it.
Do you feel it?
I have experienced that. I've just written a book about the experience, and not as a victim.
How often, Afua?
But
seriously, how often
as a daily experience. And this is the thing, and I don't want to get not overt racism, but acts of othering, Carol. Yes, microaggressions, subtle prejudice that often comes from very well-meaning people who mean no harm, who don't see themselves racist.
Therefore, it's not racism.
And you know, one of
if it's well-intentioned, it's not racism.
One of the problems, I think, is the idea that I don't see race, which is exactly what you're saying, which again, Michelle, very well-intentioned. I can see what you're saying. You are distancing yourself from a history where people judged each other based on race and were prejudiced against people because of their race, right? You're distancing yourself from that, saying,
I just don't
have no part in that.
That's great, I don't see anyone as different or unequal. I just see people the same.
That doesn't mean to say that other people don't. Because you
there are two things. There are two things. One,
I don't speak for the whole nation,
when you say you don't see something, you are blinding yourself to reality. We live in a world where racial injustice is a structural part of our reality. So if you choose not to see it, you are blinding yourself to something that exists.
Let me just correct this.
And secondly, this is important too. Let me just finish my point. Secondly, my heritage as a black person is not something I want you to be blind to. It's part of who I am. So by saying you don't see it, you are blinding yourself to something I see as positive. And when people do that, it makes me question whether they still think it's a negative thing, that it's better not to see.
My sentence is very quick. It's not that when I say I don't see it, I don't feel towards you anything other than what I feel towards you. So when I say I don't see it, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying I don't have those thoughts anywhere in my body, and a huge number of other people do not either.
OK, attention, quiet in the ranks. It's me after the break, and I'll be talking about that new army advert. While it is undoubtedly early days, desperately early, some might say, I'm ready to nominate my daftest story of the year for 2018. It is the absurd advertising campaign launched this month seeking to encourage potential recruits with emotional frailty to join the army. Now, what do you suppose is the purpose of an army? It is to fight, to defend, to kill, and to sometimes endure conditions, engage in and witness events that we cannot imagine in our darkest nightmares. It might well be an unpalatable truth, but this country sometimes relies on hard men and women to protect us or fight for us. Anyone with emotional problems needs help. They don't need to be on the front line, and no one benefits from vulnerable people being there. Not them, not the army, and certainly not their comrades who could be relying on them for their very lives.
Nick, I looked at all these ads. I actually thought it was quite a clever campaign.
Well, you might.
I did. I think, I mean, because the ad, then that's only one of a series of ads. I mean, the Army's got a problem. They're losing 10,000 people a year and they're not recruiting enough. They're 3,000 down in total, and they're looking at other ways of getting people to join. Seems to me that's quite a good idea. I mean, what would I sell if I was knowing people who got into the Army as privates? And I said, well, what would I sell? I'd sell, we look after you.
Yes.
We're your family, you know, and for a lot of people coming from quite difficult families, going into the Army is a solution.
Yeah.
It gives them the friendship and the families they haven't got.
I'll come back to you in a second. For those who haven't seen the ad, for those who haven't seen, because I know you have, let's actually watch it.
The Army is family. I've probably told them things I wouldn't even tell my own family. There's always someone there to talk to, or even just make you laugh.
You don't like that ad, Nick?
I don't.
I've got one that you're going to love.
I want to
Have a look at this. It's for the Chinese Army.
我叫刘金怡，很多人知道我是一名特种兵，但很少有人知道我是从地方大学入。
Well, I know which one I choose. Back to you. But you see, I wasn't in the army. My dad was in the army because he came from the generation when he didn't have a choice. He was called up. And when he spoke about it, which wasn't a great deal, it was quite tough. And I think that's what soldiering is. And it is not somewhere where, if you have problems, you want to put that bloke or woman on the front line in Helmand Province watching his friends being blown apart. It's not going to work, Greg.
Well, you know, the ad agency who put this out, they're called Karma Rama, which says it all to me. Their watchword is good karma. There's not much good karma on the killing fields of Afghanistan or Iraq. But and the thing that really, I think they're patronising, but the part that really I thought was insulting to soldiers was that there was a quote about bonding, about how it's all about bonding, and it says, this ad promotes the notion of belonging to a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and forming powerful bonds. Have these guys ever talked to a soldier who's ever been in combat? Because the bottom line is that the one thing they all have is this unbreakable bond that they're prepared to die for each other on the battlefield.
I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding the point of this.
I'm not misunderstanding
the point of this is for people who haven't been in the army, don't know what it's like, who are trying to communicate what people...
But they don't want people who need to be talking about emotional problems.
You know, Nick said you don't want people with problems. How many people do you know who have no problems?
How many people have no problems?
How many people have no problems?
There's me.
The point is,
cost 1.6 million quid. Do you know what an army recruit gets paid in training? 14.5 grand. When they're trained, they get 80 grand. Maybe that's the reason why not so many people are joining the army. Because the pay is pretty
are so unreconstructed. Masculinity has changed.
Right.
You can be a man and have problems and fight.
But
and by the way,
I don't want you on the front line.
Yes,
Back to you in a
gender
minute.
has changed. There are women in the army now too.
I said hard men and women. I said hard men and hard women. Michelle.
I want to make 2 points.
Good.
My first one is I could have saved them that over £1 million because they're putting this recruitment campaign out to try and recruit because their numbers are failing. One of the reasons that their number is failing is because the way we treat our ex-servicemen and women returning back into this country is an absolute... it's disgusting.
Yes.
It's shameful. We do not look after people. So, to your second point about being mentally strong, everybody has mental health, whether you're man, woman, old or young, and that mental health is something that's non-guaranteed. It's fragile and it can change at any point in time. So there's no such thing as you are a strong person, so you can go in that box and you're weak and you can go in over there. What we do and the way that we treat people that we ask to risk their life to protect us, we treat them badly. We do not look after them when they come back. And if the army want to start recruiting people, they must sort that out because it's shame on
One of the reasons we have a recruiting problem is because we keep successive governments keep on cutting the numbers. Every year they cut massive amounts from the ranks, from the army, from the navy, from the RAF. Can I just bring in this graphic to show how many we have now, how many soldiers we have now? 70. Now, what we need is 82,000 to be a fighting force. We have less soldiers in the army now since the Napoleonic Wars. We haven't had so few since then. And the reason we haven't is because, 1, you say we're not treating them right, 2, we don't pay them properly, and 3, we're getting rid of them all.
All right, Greg.
No, I don't think that's true. They want 82,000, they can't recruit them.
No,
10,000 left last year. 9,000 joined. What they're trying to do is get more people in. They've obviously gone to an agency and said, all right, find out, do the research, find out why people don't want to join the army.
Well, they're cutting numbers to save money.
No, let me finish. They've done the piece of research. They said, look, there's a set of reasons. This is what we think they are. Now, actually, in amongst them, I suspect quite high, is the fact we've got fairly full employment. And historically, when kids couldn't get jobs, they joined the army. I mean,
but every year...
Kids from the north-east joined the army.
They did, but every year the government cuts numbers to save money from the military. They're cutting the army's, what do you call it, force this year? The force that goes onto water and everything. They're cutting the Navy, they're cutting the RAF to save cash.
But you and Michelle are kind of saying similar things. You know, and I agree with you both. There's no point putting out flashy ads if the root cause is that you don't treat people properly, and if you don't have more money to treat them properly. And then it's misleading to recruitment. And my only worry about this ad, which I personally think is good, I think it is appealing to a new demographic of potential recruits.
The army bosses don't. They think it won't appeal to the very people who are likely to join the army.
Unreconstructed.
Which army bosses are you talking about?
A guy called Richard
Kemp.
Yes.
Sure.
Richard
Here we go. Exactly.
Every journalist has got.
OK, we've got it here.
Their army guy
commander of the British Army in Afghanistan.
He was on television all last week.
He's not now.
But he's
gone.
God, Greg, you know
Are you telling me that the
nothing.
army didn't approve these ads? Well, of course they
Michelle's-
would.
Michelle's-
Senior
Is it-
level.
but it's
Of course
politically
they would. So
correct
let's just-
nonsense.
Let's hear from this guy, this Colonel
Kemp.
Richard Kemp. Yeah,
Oh, good,
'cause
right,
he has sent a message. My main problem with this is the Army's limited advertising budget is being squandered on a campaign that will not help make up the 4,000 plus deficit in manpower, which is the priority of demonstrating how tolerant it is of minorities. And I hope I'm wrong.
But what's that
He
based on?
he
How does
doesn't
he
know
know that?
Why does he know that?
Yeah.
Hang on, I think
He's
we
an
need to-
army colonel.
This is
Unless
what
he's
it is.
saying
Hold
they
on.
don't want to recruit minorities.
If you won't listen to me, the Army, like the rest of the government, says Colonel Kemp, is being forced down a route of political correctness. What is most important is the Army is full of soldiers. It's of secondary importance they reflect the composition
Okay,
of
hold
society.
the front page.
Here's some more.
So you know better than a colonel.
Military man does not want to broaden
You know
the
better
appeal
than a
of the
colonel,
army.
do you?
What does he know about
And I'm
the
not being
future?
sucky-uppy
future
to a colonel.
recruitment?
You know better than he does.
No,
How-
come on,
what-
come on.
on what basis
Nick,
can he
Nick,
tell
you're
whether that
just-
will appeal?
Nick, you've been a journalist for years. Every journalist has got someone like him they can phone up to get that sort of quote. I've done it, you've done it, we've all done it.
We've got 6 of them here to
but
quote
here
if you want.
Sure, but here you've got the Army who've done a piece of research, I've no doubt, and said, look,
I'd
we're
love to
trying to
see
get
that
different
research.
people. Right. And we'll run this. They'll
Like
find out whether it
Armour.
works or not. It's as simple as that.
But there's an
Their
advert.
problem is going to be partly is full employment.
Now, we've all been there. Someone's droning on about Brexit. In the afternoon, you've had a big lunch, and all you want to do is close your eyes and drift off.
I decided I will try to make a very short speech to save myself.
It's oh so quiet. Shh, shh. It's oh so still. Shh, shh. And so peaceful until
The Charter of Fundamental Rights was the bit I was least keen on.
Sir Desmond Swain's excuse for his 40 winks? A 5:30 a.m. dip in Hyde Park Serpentine, apparently. Well, for saying what many of us are thinking without actually saying anything at all. Sir Desmond, you get out straight talk, or is it sleepwalker of the week? Congratulations. Greg, you'll have been through so many boardroom meetings.
No,
and
I sat at a conference and went fast asleep, and someone took a picture of me, and of course they put it in the trade mag. So there was a picture of me fast asleep. So I wrote and
Were you
complained.
slavering?
No, I wrote and complained. And I said, I'm not complaining that you used the picture. I'm complaining that when you took it, you woke me up.
Ever happened to you?
But yeah, all the time I used to be a court reporter, so all that I used
I
to
was just
drop
going
off
to say
all
the
the time
reason
in
they
court.
keep
It's hot.
courtrooms so freezing cold is
Oh, no,
to
it's
stop
hot.
judges
Well, years
falling
ago,
asleep.
they were
It's very
hot.
annoying.
They were hot. In fact,
Well,
I was just going to say, the judge actually stopped the court case to tell me to wake up, but anyway, that's by the by.
We've had a hot one today, but that's
Yeah.
it for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.